A question often asked in America is, why are there so many homeless people? The most typical response is because they are drug addicts or have mental health issues. Yet, not everyone with a substance use disorder or mental health issues becomes unhoused. Income makes a huge difference. Research shows that only 34.7% of homeless adults have a chronic substance use disorder. Race, systemic poverty, low income, and disability also play a significant role in people becoming unhoused. Today, I'd like to focus on the particularly hidden disability of being neurodivergent as a root cause for being unhoused in America. Neurodivergence includes learning disorders, dyslexia, autism spectrum, ADHD, and general sensory disabilities. Dr. Angela Bymaster, a physician who works with homeless patients in San Jose, discovered that 39.4% of her patients responded positively to having been in special education during school or diagnosed with learning disorders. National Alliance to End Homelessness showed that 65% of the unhoused are disabled, and 30 to 40% of those have a neurodivergent disability. But, in the UK, a study was done with unhoused clients, and they found that 13% of the clients displayed neurodivergent qualities and had not been previously diagnosed. If the current statistic in America for neurodivergence in the unhoused population is 30 to 40%, adding new findings that 13% more have not been diagnosed brings us to almost 50% of the unhoused population having neurodivergence. A study of homeless people sleeping in the streets in Devon, England, found that 65% had been diagnosed with autism. What if there's an even higher percentage of neurodivergence in America than 50%? If we roll back to high school, about 25% of first-year high school students fail to graduate on time, with 18% of those students diagnosed with a neurodivergent disorder. Neurodivergent students are twice as likely to drop out of high school, and sadly, non-high school graduates have a 4.5 times more chance of becoming unhoused. While not every student who drops out of school is neurodivergent, 60% of adults with literacy problems have undetected or untreated learning disabilities according to the Learning Disabilities Association of America, and women are likely underdiagnosed with neurodivergence by 80%. The likelihood of an underdiagnosis in high school dropouts is high and contributes to the possibility that our unhoused population is underdiagnosed too. This brings us to the intersection of unemployment and neurodivergence. Unemployment for neurodivergent adults runs at least as high as 30 to 40%. 3 times the rate for people with other disabilities and 8 times the rate for people without disabilities, with the number jumping to 80% unemployment for people with autism. Getting approved for disability income in America is extremely difficult for people with neurodivergence. If one is approved, the payment is insufficient to cover housing costs in most cities. Undiagnosed neurodivergence often leads to parents being frustrated with their children and kicking them out of the house. While some parents support their neurodivergent child into adulthood, often, once the parents pass away, the other family members cannot, or choose not to, sustain that support. The inability to work in a regular job or get social support for neurodivergence leads to an intersection with incarceration. Psychology Today tells us that neurodivergent people are routinely excluded from non-criminalized jobs due to their inaccessible workspaces. So, many neurodivergent people end up incarcerated. Of all males in federal and state prisons, 80% do not have a high school diploma, of which it can be assumed that at least 20% or more are neurodivergent. Yet a new study showed that 28 and 43% of detained or incarcerated youth have special education needs. This discrepancy means we could be missing over 20% of people's neurodivergence. In a 2018 report, it was found that formerly incarcerated people are almost 10 times more likely to be homeless than the general public. Many of our unhoused population could have been on a direct path to homelessness, from being frustrated in school, to dropping out, to not being able to work a regular job, to addiction and/or incarceration, and ultimately homelessness. What about the classic notion that addiction makes people homeless? While substance use disorder often becomes unbearable for families or communities to bear, research is starting to show a newly understood underlying cause of substance use disorder that we had not seen before, which is undiagnosed neurodivergence. It has been found that up to 60% of adolescents in treatment for substance abuse have learning disabilities, and those that are neurodivergent are 2 times more likely to form substance dependency than their peers. They also found that those with combined high IQ and ADHD had an elevated risk of addiction, even more so for individuals with a dual diagnosis of ADHD and autism. neurodivergence isn't even considered in most substance use disorder research projects. This is a problem. It is possible that many of the unhoused population who struggle with substance use disorder also have an undiagnosed neurodivergent disorder, and will need a unique recovery program. Studies also show an interesting intersection between mental health and underdiagnosed neurodivergence. In a study involving 787 adults with bipolar I diagnoses, 47.2% showed clinically significant autistic traits. The Journal of the Canadian Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry found that nearly 17% of youngsters with specific learning disorders suffer from severe stress, and 75% have low levels of resilience, and 46% are more likely to attempt suicide than people without learning disorders. Furthermore, 80% of females with autism remain undiagnosed at age 18, which has severe consequences for the mental health of young women. For instance, people, particularly women, with intellectual disabilities are 7 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than members of the general population. At the same time, up to 70% of homeless women have been diagnosed with mental illness. Could the stats of underdiagnosed neurodivergence in women coinciding with the percentage of unhoused women be more than a coincidence? Diagnosing people with mental health instead of or without recognizing neurodivergence as an underlying or co-occurring disorder is a huge disservice to the unhoused community. A study in UK in 2021 showed that case management interventions were significantly better than treatment in reducing substance use among people who are unhoused. People with neurodivergence need a unique therapy style. Looking at the combination of undiagnosed neurodivergence in schools, justice systems, drug abuse programs, and those with a mental health diagnosis, which all have a direct influence on a person's housing stability, could bring us to 60 to 75% of our unhoused population struggling with neurodivergence. Unfortunately, neurodivergence is rarely spoken about in homeless services. Training and accommodation in neurodivergence are all but missing, or accommodations are considered an unneeded crutch. When seeking services, people must fill out 15 or more pages of paperwork with small print. Intake forms are usually mismatched and copies for clients to read or fill out, making the letters fuzzy and leaving extra marks on the page, thus being distracting and making it hard to focus. There are over 75 questions on the housing assessment tool, which is the only way an unhoused person can access housing assistance options. Reading and writing accommodations are often denied in shelters or day centers. Clients get labeled lazy or difficult, thus causing the client to become emotionally dysregulated and then further labeled as bad. Intake questionnaires and forms are repeated over and over in every organization a client works with, often resulting in overwhelm and emotional meltdowns, thus disqualifying a client from services due to behavioral problems. A client may have to wait hours in a chaotic place for intake at a shelter or day center. Information is often posted in random places with various font sizes, are often outdated, making it hard to know where to go and when to get there. Information gathering from a client is repeated again and again. For instance, a client's biography might be asked by a street outreach staff, then another biography at shelter intake. And again when a client meets with a housing navigator, and then again with the case manager. And even more times if the client meets with a mental health clinician or a substance disorder counselor, and yet again if the client wants to utilize services in another organization like applying for food stamps or disability, and on and on. Unhoused services can create a safer place for people who are struggling with neurodivergence by providing awareness, a welcoming atmosphere, and accommodations. Ray Jacobson shared about how diagnosis helped her. She wrote, "The day I was diagnosed with ADHD, my life changed. I was 21, drifting and confused. For as long as I could remember, I'd struggled to stay afloat. As the doctor explained the diagnosis, I felt a wave of relief crashing over me. I had spent years thinking of my ADHD symptoms as personal failings. Getting diagnosed was a turning point that helped me begin building a brighter, better future." Angela Andrews spent most of her life feeling like she was standing in front of a bubble, and inside this bubble, everyone was beautiful, but she was standing outside in the dark because she couldn't learn the rules. Her sensory issues caused her to destroy many of the clothes that she felt were too tight or made of uncomfortable fabric. This angered her parents, who were unaware they were raising a neurodistinct child. At the age of 27, testing revealed that she was autistic, after which she gained the confidence to continue her studies at 31. In her first job, she was bullied, but friends stuck up for her and got her through it. Angela now works as a high-level data integrity manager at a Johnson & Johnson family company. What can unhoused services do to be a part of the solution? First, start talking about and normalizing neurodivergence in homeless services. Second, create and mandate training for all staff working with the unhoused population. Third, set up simple, straightforward, and easy intake documents and information sharing programs. Fourth, mandate shelters and mental health facilities offer learning disorder or autism spectrum tests on site. Fifth, understand that traditional therapy, jobs and learning will not work for at least 60% of the unhoused population due to neurodivergence. At the very least, improving services with neurodiversity in mind would make services more accessible for all people, let alone those who struggle with neurodivergence, and just might save lives.